Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Untold Radio. How's it going, Doug?
Well, it's going. As you know, we had to reboot all of our software again.
Of course, right?
You know
And
why, too? I do know why. It's because all of these different softwares, like if you use a different video conferencing software, they must hate each other. So they all have this little bug they put in. And
a
they
little
do.
gotcha.
Oh, I'm positive of it because there's no way they could be that incompatible. Where if you use Zoom, then Skype won't work. You use Skype, Zoom won't work. The next time you go to use, you got to reboot your computer. It's just BS. So that's what happened to us again and again. So
At least we know where it's coming from.
yeah. So tonight we have what? Rich Hoffman on. 54 years, if you could imagine that, of investigating UFOs.
Impressive.
That's kind of insane. So I have a feeling he'll know what he's talking about. And Rich is from the Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. So we're going to have him on in 20 minutes. But before we get going, Alex, I would like to give away a hat.
Okay, cool. How do you want to do it?
Okay. So I was going to ask some trivia question. I guarantee someone will have to look it up. So we'll wait until we maybe get some people in the chat here. I don't know what we got going on. We got some people. So we'll wait a little bit and then I'll do that. So remind me in like 5 minutes.
Okay.
All right. So there was, excuse me, geez, I'm losing my voice today. I've been talking on the phone all day. So I uploaded a video of your little brother, Blaine.
Yeah, the Bigfoot sounds.
Yeah, don't you like that when I call him your little brother?
Yeah, he is small.
But anyhow, so I uploaded the sounds from his latest expedition, which I think people are finding really interesting. It's just a tape recorder that he puts out away from his tent, runs an audio cord into the tent so they can listen with earphones and hear every little, nuance and little twig. And the first time they tried it, they fell asleep and all hell broke loose. I mean, these things were throwing rocks like crazy, ricocheting off other rocks, hitting the water. Those guys slept right through it. I have no idea how they did it. And then the second night, which I just posted, they were awake. And it's really interesting to hear Blaine's reaction, where he's yelling, easy, buddy, easy.
Yeah, yeah.
Does that sound like Blaine doing something?
Yes.
Yeah, it does?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know what I would do. When we were up at Snow Grove, we've had the cabin attack 4 times. But I don't ever remember yelling outside easy. I just don't. It's kind of them against me at that point. I'm not communicating with them.
Yeah, I think he's gotten a lot more comfortable around them.
Well, that seems like it. He seemed to be convinced that no harm would come because those rocks and that activity, I mean, those things were literally right outside his tent. Whatever it was, he doesn't know. I assume it's a Bigfoot, but could be a camper, I guess. Kind of doubtful though that a camper would be running around the woods.
No, not that far out.
2 a.m, that far out.
And you have part 3 you're going to release soon.
Yes,
some more of the audio.
But I won't even tell people what that entails. But I won't be releasing that. So anyhow, so let's reward people that are loyal and they're here right now. I know it's a beautiful summer evening all over the U.S. We're just getting off a long 4th of July weekend. Okay. So all I need to know is the first person that can tell me what the word means. Selenophobia. First person that can tell me what that means, we'll send them a free hat. And Alex, we'll even autograph it with a silver mark Sharpie underneath the bill.
Nice.
We'll do that. And we'll ruin the value of it, of course, the hat. But we'll even do that.
Deborah, I think you're talking about Blaine. Right?
Yeah, Blaine is tough. Yeah, you're not tough, Alex.
No.
Anyhow, so the word is selenophobia. It's spelled S-E-L-E-N-A phobia. And even I had no idea what it meant. And I know most of my phobias.
You want to share them on the air?
No, no. I have claustrophobia. I'll share that one.
Deborah just said irrational fear of the moon.
Yes, that's it. So, Deborah, we are going to send you a hat first thing tomorrow. And just gotta email Untold Radio or Alex at untoldradio.am.com and give me your address where to ship it to.
Cool. Thanks a lot, Deborah.
I'm going to be sipping on water all night. When it gets really humid and I talk on the phone all day, I lose my voice. You would think that would happen when it's dry.
But it's the
like when yours dry in January. No. Never then. It's always when it's really humid. It just messes me up. Anyhow, so I was remembering something I did. I don't think I've ever shared this with you. It was pretty naughty. It's probably one of the naughtiest things I've ever done, right? So when I was 10 years old, God, I hope statute of limitations has run out on this confession. So when I was 10, I heard from somebody that the grocery store that was about a mile away, Alex, you could see it from the backyard. And it was a mile away because it was just flat. There were no trees. We lived in the suburbs. And it was an old river valley, an old ancient river valley. It was just flat as a pancake. So you could see this. But somebody had told me that the shopping center used channel 14. And of course, I knew that was the same channel as my walkie-talkies, which is a public band, right? But walkie-talkies are too weak, to be able to have like a store like that pick up any chatter. But no. So at 10 years old, I bought one of these Heath kits. And it was something where I could dial any voltage I want. I could plug it into the wall. And then I could dial it down to, 9 volts, 10 volts, 12 volts. It's basically an early power supply that I built myself. So I'm thinking, I wonder if I hook up this to my walkie-talkie, I wonder if I can boost the power and I could then hack into the speaker system at the grocery store. So I dialed up the footage, right to where I could start to smell the electronics frying, right? I backed it off a little bit. I don't know where it was, probably to 50 volts, 80 volts, somewhere in there. And I sent my friend up to the grocery store. And of course, I started making little brief, because it was literally starting to kind of smoke when I would do these.
Smoking.
It would start getting hot, right?
Yeah.
So I did this message, and then I'd have him come back. I didn't wait, half an hour. He comes back and he told me exactly what I said on the loudspeaker. So I'm thinking, well, this is going to be fun. So for probably a week, I was messing around, and I do remember getting yelled at from some ham radio operator or somebody had heard me.
Oh, no.
Saying they were going to track me down. Or someone from the FCC said they're going to track. So you just unplug everything, and of course the problem's over. Well, one day, my mother, your grandmother, is up shopping at this grocery store, and I don't know it. She stopped and grabbed milk or whatever, eggs or whatever. And I'm out on the intercom.
Oh, no.
So she, of course, I did these really brief. It was never bad. I never swore, never did anything like that. I would just say that, all dairy's on sale, for 90% off or something.
Innocent.
Like that. Innocent stuff. So I did that. She comes home and she goes, And I think when she was mad, she called me Douglas. Oh, Douglas, we need to talk. And she asked me, and of course I told her. She didn't take away anything, but she gave me that mom guilt, the guilt that you're never doing that again. And the kind that you were so guilty because she didn't do anything to you that you were like, you thought about it every day. It haunted you. So anyhow, but the reason I bring it up, because it made me think of all the famous creepy, and many of them are really creepy, times television stations and radio stations have been hacked.
They have been hacked.
You didn't know about this?
No.
Oh, see, this is good. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it started like in the 70s. You know, people would be watching TV and all of a sudden there'd be a new broadcast on from some hacker.
Yeah.
He'd be broadcasting some, many times, very creepy, scary messages. So, okay, so I wanted to just, talk a little bit about some of these cases. So, okay, so let me read this. Hackers have been hacking television stations for decades, because that's when it's really creepy. When you can have a visual too to go along with the creepy audio. So for decades, I gotta get this centered here. The most notorious of such incidents occurred in the 70s and 80s. The hackers would interrupt a live program and chip in whatever live recorded audio they wanted. Okay. But in some cases, of course, they were putting in video signals too. Some even took over the entire broadcast and replaced them with their very own videos at times. The memorable ones were the ones that were alien-like or really creepy. Do you remember the name Max Headroom?
No, who's Max Headroom?
Oh, okay. Well, I can't even explain it. You have to look it up. Anybody?
Okay, yeah.
But he was kind of a digital animated guy that was voiced obviously by a real guy. It was kind of a big thing in the 80s, I think, on MTV. But I remember one that one of the famous ones where that Max Headroom space and voice had been hacked into a TV station. Okay, so here are some of the cases. And by the way, I did get this from listverse.com. Give them credit because they had a really nice list of some of these. So on November 26, 1977, someone hacked into the now defunct Southern Television several minutes into the 5 p.m. news. And this was in the UK. And I remember this one clearly because it made the news. It made national news because it was so bizarre. Okay. So apparently there was this new newscaster, Andrew Gardner. But you couldn't hear his voice. And all of a sudden a voice took over and replaced his voice by someone claiming to be an alien. Now, the reason it's creepy is because what if it was an alien?
Exactly.
Why it's creepy? Because it sounded so legit. Okay. So this guy, he said his name was Brillian. Brillian claimed to be a spokesman of the alien group called the Ashtar Galactic Command. So it sounds really corny. But what was interesting is what he said actually made sense. He was actually spouting off all this wisdom and advice, right? So over the next, remember this went on 6 minutes. Brillian warned humans against engaging in warfare. He ordered the destruction of every weapon and advised humans to live in peace. He added that only peaceful people would advance to what he called the higher realms of spiritual evolution. Gardner continued reading the news. So the newscaster is still reading. He doesn't know that his audio has been replayed.
Yeah.
Right? He has no idea. So he keeps reading the news, and this transmission just kept going on. And apparently the hacker to this day remains unknown. He never did it again.
He never did.
No. So what I found creepy when I was younger, when I heard about this, is that I thought maybe it was real. Maybe it was an alien that hacked in. Okay. And by the way, that can be, I think you can find it on YouTube, the entire broadcast. It's really creepy. Okay, then on April 27th, 1986, listen to this. A hacker hacked HBO.
He hacked HBO.
Hacked HBO satellites, yeah. During a live transmission of the movie The Falcon and the Snowman. Okay. The hacker called himself Captain Midnight and had full control over the satellite for 4.5 minutes. During that time, he replaced the movie with a still image of a message that read, "Good evening, HBO from Captain Midnight. $12.95 a month? No way." Showtime/movie channel, beware. Okay. And that went on. Apparently, investigators did reveal who he was. They did catch him. I'm not even going to repeat his name. I don't want to give the guy grief if he's still around. But apparently, let's see, what did they do to him here? They, I think, he ended up with a $5,000 fine and didn't have to serve any time in jail. See, I started small time.
Yeah.
Right. I never worked my way up. I quit right there.
Just as a heads up, Rich is in the back room.
Oh, okay. What time is it? Oh, okay. Yeah, we are running late. All right, we'll leave it at that, and I can revisit some maybe next week.
Okay, great. So we're going to have Rich Hoffman on. He has worked as a defense contractor for over 20 years, and he's worked primarily with the Army Material Command. He has over 54 years of experience investigating and researching the UFO subject. Mr. Hoffman has served as the Director of Investigations, STAR Team Manager, Director of the Strategic Project, as well as the State Director of MUFON, and worked with numerous other organizations. Welcome, Rich. How are you doing?
I'm well. How are you?
Hey, Rich. It's good to meet you.
It's good to be on with you. I'll add one thing. I'm also the board. I'm no longer with MUFON, and I'm really one of the founding officers of the SCU, Scientific Coalition for UAP Studies. So I thought I'd add that in.
I was going to get to that, Rich.
Okay. I'm sure.
But yeah, that's what we're going to obviously talk a lot about that. I'm really impressed with what you guys are doing. I've been on your website quite a bit, read all your mission statements and so on. So let's just get into that. What exactly are you in kind of, I guess, a shorter description? What is the SCU?
Well, the SCU is back in the early days of the UFO phenomena. Of course, I've been at this now actually for 58 years. It's no longer 54. But anyway, for 58 years ago, I got started, and I was living in Dayton, Ohio, and I got to know J. Allen Hynek and all the people a lot of the people that were heading up Project Blue Book, which was the Air Force project at the time. And so Hynek's vision at that time was largely to be able to get scientists to engage in the study of the phenomena. Mm-hmm. And he struggled with that for many years, trying to get scientists to do that. Some joined him. And then you also have Jacques Vallée, who was working with him for a period of time, and also wrote the book called The Invisible College, which was about the idea that scientists were doing this in the background, but they couldn't talk about it because that it was just too much woo-woo, I guess, and they didn't feel comfortable with that. And so ultimately, what happened with the 2017 kind of announcements, we've seen more scientists that are coming out of the closet, if you would, and basically now wanting to join up and do studies in the UAP phenomena. And so in 2013. We started a team together, and we called ourselves SCU. At that time, it was Scientific Coalition for UFO, for ufology, actually. But we changed our name to the Coalition for UAP Studies in about 2017, and then after, when we actually became an official organization. Now we've got over 200 members that are all scientists or researchers, serious researchers, engineers, various disciplines. And we're like a think tank that's basically out there studying the phenomena, writing papers, putting together basically articles for journals, and really trying to tackle the phenomena for the very first time scientifically.
So are you guys also doing active research where you're out with equipment and that type of things, trying to capture your own, vetted? Obviously, if you guys capture it, it's not hoaxed.
Yeah, so we've actually had an effort early on where we were actually doing field studies. So, for example, an hour away from me is an area, Florence, Alabama, and north of that is a little town called Cloverdale. And there is I don't know if you've ever heard of what they call the Earthlight phenomena. Yep. But the Earthlight phenomena is one of those things like Hesteland, Norway, You hear it talked about. You also hear about it like the Brown Mountain Lights, the Marfa Lights, the Min Min Lights in Australia, and Yakima and Piedmont, Missouri also are like areas where there's these lights that are seen in the nighttime sky that nobody can seemingly explain. And even science really hasn't addressed it very much. But anyway, we had a field study where we were out there for actually 3 years looking for Earth-light phenomena that were out since 1973. And you have basically like an orb, kind of like phenomena where it's like 8 foot wide. It's orange in color. It's made up of various gases, if you would, that come together and coalesce into a ball. And it ignites, and it basically can move along through the sky, either against the wind or in conjunction with the wind. But what we saw was that it tended to go either west to east or east to west in that area. So it's an unusual phenomenon, and many times it's reported as UFOs by a lot of people because they just don't understand it. And yet it's a natural phenomena that it exists, and again, gets misreported. And so consequently, we looked at doing that. In addition to that, we've also basically got partners that actually are the technology part of our team. We're partnered with UAPX, which is basically, if you saw the movie A Tear in the Sky, that's on like Amazon, and you can actually buy it from a whole lot of those places. Netflix, I think, also has it for sale. But anyway, A Tear in the Sky was recently on, and that was about the Catalina Island investigation. It's a field study. And they did that for 5 days, where they were actually caught quite a number of different things out near Catalina off the coast of California. And ultimately, basically now SCU is assisting and going to be going through that data and those video clips and looking at the FLIR kind of information to be able to see what we can actually determine from it. So we per se don't have an instrumentation group. We're not going like MUFON, doing case investigations out in field or anything of that nature. What we're looking for are cases where it's got good, solid scientific evidence, whether it's supported by, like things like radar, or it might be the use of infrared cameras, or a whole lot of other kinds of like more technical things than the general person with their cell phone taking a photo up in the sky.
Yeah. How many cases have you personally investigated where there was, physical evidence left? Burned plant material.
I probably, in my 58 years, have investigated probably about over at least 1,000 cases, I know. And that's being out in the fields, going during flap years. I don't know if you know what flap years are, but those are high intense periods where, like in 1973, every part of the country was being hit by UAPs or UFOs, and people reporting there. So there was a lot of activity within a geographic area. And I've investigated cases where there are effects. In fact, one case that I saw in 1973 was probably my aha moment for my belief in UFOs, because it was a 70-foot in diameter circular area of a wheat field where there's no longer any wheat. The ground has been baked 2 feet in the ground. There's no roots of the wheat in the down to 2 feet level. And then as you go progressively out from the center of that 70-foot area, you start to see a little bit of the roots that are maybe still underground on the edge of that circular area. And then you'll see a little bit of a stubble, and you go out a little bit further and you saw a rotational pattern in the wheat. And then you see puffed wheat in a 70-foot circular area around that. And there's microwave radiation. There's again, the dehydration of the soil. And so, and it's in the middle of a wheat field where there's actually no tracks or anything of any kind of equipment going into that area. And it was the next day after a large number of sightings happened. So that's an example of the kind of like effects that I've seen. I've seen other areas where tree limbs are broken and there's some burn marks or something of that nature.
Yeah. So the soil, I've always been interested in this, hydrophobic type soil where it just won't absorb water anymore. What do you think has landed? And do you think there's just probably a whole bunch of, and I think this is just brain diarrhea, Rich, speculation. I realize that, but you must think about it.
Yeah,
do you think we're being visited by a number, that we could be being visited by a number of races using all sorts of types of different technology? And that's got to be, it's a problem in even studying it.
Yeah, you're dealing with something that's relatively unknown. We just don't know what it is or where it's from. That's the problem we have. It's not like we see an object going by with a license plate on the back of it that says it's from the planet, whatever.
Exactly.
And the nature of the objects are all, if you think about the history of the ufology, you see that they come in all different sizes. They can all move within relative ease in water or in air, in space. And it's the same object. There's no visible means of any kind of lift kind of properties, no kind of means of propulsion that we can make out. There are cases that are just extraordinary. You got size differences, everything from like a grapefruit on up to an object the size of an aircraft carrier. And you have objects that 1 minute can be caught on radar, another time that they can't be tracked on radar. So you have a tremendous variety of objects that we've seen over the period of the history that will, of ufology or UAP studies. And so consequently, you have to sit back and say, well, wait a minute, if you take a look at the Tic Tac, from 2004, and we actually wrote a paper on it on our website, but you have an object that, for example, that descended from 20,000 feet to stop above the water in 0.78 seconds, not even 1 second. And you think about that, and you actually look at the fact that it's going a Mach 50 or greater, that it's a shape that is extraordinarily not aerodynamic. It's of a Tic Tac. It has no propulsion systems, no nothing. And how could you possibly do that or replicate that with any of our current day technology? And you're left struggling and you can't really do it. And so consequently, that kind of, Mach 55 and not breaking sound, sonic booms or the kinetic energy that was released when it actually would stop,
right,
would have basically knocked out the power grid across all the ships, even if they were 60 miles away. I mean, it was just huge kinetic release, equivalent to like the output of the Hoover Dam. And so how does that happen in our universe and in our reality right now? And yet that's been going on all along since we've seen them 1940s, we started calling them flying discs and flying saucers. But the same thing, the same kind of maneuvers, the same kind of shapes, the same. And so how do they do that? And it's certainly not any technology on this planet that can even possibly replicate that, right? So, but where they're from, we don't know, or how they get here, or what they're, we just don't know yet. There's not enough science data to help.
I realize we don't know, but is this something you guys talk amongst yourselves and try to look for data of different craft that behave completely different, thinking, oh, this one may be from a different area, or this one might be a time traveler, this one's from a planet. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Well, I could be wrong, but are what you're saying, Doug, is like, have you guys almost like narrowed down like classes? Like, like there's almost like 10 different types of.
Yeah. So we have a shape study, and basically we've got a study that's ongoing right now where we're looking at shape characterization over a period of time, right? And we're trying to see if we can't sort through all the ash and trash to figure out what that's about. The second part so that's one team that's actually doing that kind of a study. And we should probably have that report, probably, I would guess, finished by maybe like later this year. And so that will be a paper that will be, put together that we'll actually submit and do a peer review on and take it from there. So that's one kind of aspect of the study that we're doing. Another kind of an aspect of the study that we're doing is also looking at the for any kind of visible signs of propulsion or effects that we see in the atmosphere as a result of these things. And so we're looking at that. That's another study that we got. We're looking at the intent behind the objects that we're seeing around the nuclear facilities, the storage facilities, the actual detonation sites, the production facilities that are out there where we produce nuclear materials, those Minuteman missiles and those other kinds of missiles. We're looking at that kind of thing, and the intent. Can we determine intent here? What are they trying to do? What was going on at that nuclear power plant that maybe would have drawn them to it, right? So we've got that kind of a study that's going on. So we are trying to do all these various studies to try to see if we can get closer to answers, and that will get us beyond the endless speculation. And to your answer, can you narrow it down into like one or two hypotheses of where they're from? And the answer is no. We can't eliminate all the variants, that are out there. For example, you mentioned time travel. Okay, well, guess what? You're talking about the typical description of the beings are very much like a human. I mean, they got two legs, they got two arms, they got two eyes, they got a head, they got everything we got like here. And the interesting thing about them is that they're also besides being bipedal on two legs standing up, and we're the only other creature on the entire earth that does that. And oh, by the way, our head is rotated up to the point where we're looking at like this, when all other mammals are like on fours and looking straight up like that, right? So our head is rotated on our cranium. So that matches into the time phenomena, as well as other kinds of like cases you look at. Bentwater's case would suggest that it's when Peniston touched it, he said he got some like ones and zeros, and it talked about that being an object that was from the future, right?
Right.
So so it could be time travel is one thing. It could be extraterrestrial. You could have some of these things that are you could have some of these things that have been living underneath the water the entire time that we're here, and especially with all the oceans, and we should be calling the Earth the planet water.
Well, the point is, Rich, it could be all of the above, right?
And trying to eliminate any one of those things so you can get closer to an answer is just impossible, because there still remains cases that fall in and lend credibility to that, whatever that hypothesis is.
Now, Rich, do you have any hunches as to the data that's coming in where you feel things might fall? Maybe it's a little bit early, but just with, for as long as you've been doing this.
Yeah, I guess basically your personal, just an opinion, not a scientific conclusion.
Okay, so I'm not sure what you're asking me to say.
Well,
are they from the planet Rigel or something of that nature?
No,
there are multiple origins here.
Aliens, time travelers,
and that's any one of those things could be the case.
Right.
So let me give you an example. All right, let me go into greater depth.
Absolutely.
Okay, so in the 1970s, I was on a TV show that was in Dayton, Ohio. That's, again, where Project Blue Book and stuff like that was, right? So I was on a TV show, and apparently one of the individuals that worked at the base saw that I was on the show, and it turns out he was the chief of Aeromed Research at Wright-Patterson. And so he called up the producer of the show and said, I want to meet Rich Hoffman, right? So I go into the studio, and the producer leads me into a closed glass room, and me and this other gentleman sit there and we talk with each other. And he proceeds to tell me he has a team of people that are actually studying, the blood and bone marrow kind of like effects from being in space. And they were exchanging information with the Soviets in terms of cosmonauts that were returning from long missions in space, because they were trying to also identify what the effects of the body is going to be of us living in space, right? So that was a study that he wanted to tell me about, and his team was doing that. And it said that his team had projected out that if we were to go out in space and we lived out there for 2 generations, by the second generation, we would look like those little guys that are being reported that are in the craft. Okay?
That's quick.
And he said he said within 2 generations we would look like that, And so I said, well, that's pretty incredible. And so that's what you're telling me. You basically believe that it could potentially be us. And he said, yeah, well, that's the conclusion we're coming up to. I mean, ultimately, that's there. So if you looked at that in that instance, and by the way, later on, the guy rejected knowing me, but nevertheless, that's what he told. And we had confirmed that he did work at the base. We confirmed his identity and everything else, right? So, I mean, bottom line there is that you've got somebody of that credibility at the base who also suggests that potentially time travel might be in play, right? Same time, you've got now, from a scientific standpoint, I can take a craft moving at Mach 55, which, by the way, is interstellar speed. And I would be able to fly that thing to the other side of the universe in probably about 1 month.
1 month.
To the other side of the universe in 1 month. Now, let me clarify that if you do that at that speed, and you can move it, you can interstellar, you could be conceivably from a planet that's somewhere else across the entire universe.
Absolutely.
The big problem is with time dilation is that you now are dealing with the fact that we will have aged much, we will probably be gone by the time, by the time you come back. Thousands of years would have elapsed because that's the time dilation phenomena, right? To the individual who's going near the speed of light, time slows down for them. So they're going to only, age about a month, or something of that nature, while we will have expired, And so, again, you could have that kind of thing going on. You could also have a thing going on where they've been here all along. I call it the they've been here all along hypothesis, because they conceivably could have been here before us, and in fact could have helped create or engineer genetically who we are.
Yeah.
So you want me to give you a one answer? I can't give you one.
No.
Because ultimately,
I'm still curious, Rich.
Yeah. I haven't got any answers. I mean, to me, it's
no. I don't mean that. I'm not even inferring that. What I'm trying to get at is, do you have an opinion that you keep to yourself? Even just an opinion. And if you have no opinion, fine. But usually people have an opinion. They're real. They're not real. There's no way they could ever get here. You know what I mean? I've talked to numerous scientists that tell me there is no way any other race could ever get here, period. And they're just closed-minded on that. Yeah. And that's what they think. And they're not going to look at any data or even think about it.
Yeah, but I guess I'm at the point where the opinion will be formed more like when I get some sort of scientific fact that actually can support something.
Yeah. Well, it seems like you guys are really open-minded, though, which is cool. That's very, very cool.
Yeah, you have to be open-minded with this because, I mean, we haven't got any answers.
Right.
And certainly we may never have any answers. I mean, what I'm trying to tell you is if we're dealing with something that potentially is like thousands and thousands of years ahead of us, we're like very insignificant in that whole realm. In fact, that's probably why they don't waste their time talking with us. However, they seem to be interacting with us a lot more, and especially with our military stuff, than they normally would.
Yeah.
And then the other part of the equation, Doug, and this is important for you to realize, I work in the Department of Defense. Okay. So I've got to be mindful of the fact that could potentially what we see out there we're calling UFOs or UAPs be our adversary. And it doesn't mean that I believe that they necessarily, that explains all of the UFOs. What I'm trying to say is that ultimately we have to be able to discriminate between those two things, because one or both actually could potentially be wanting to hurt us. But we just are not aware of it, and we have no understanding of their intent. And we have to be mindful of the fact that we have those objects that are coming up as well, because we're advancing in our technology. Drones today are quite becoming more capable than they were in the past. And there's all this incredible development around that going on, as well as military weapons that we've got.
Is there any evidence or any data to look at of small craft that could be nuts and bolts craft, like an unmanned drone type objects that are visiting us? Has there been any data you guys look at, or do you even talk about that? Possibility of drones.
Well, let me
From elsewhere.
clarify. Yeah, let me clarify to you that I don't believe that all UFOs are piloted by somebody that's on the inside of them, right?
Yep.
If I talk about an object that's the size of a grapefruit, we're talking about relatively small people, right?
Absolutely.
What I'm trying to say is that if you think about even in the context of us, what are we doing? We're not sending piloted vehicles out to Mars. We're sending the robots, right? We're sending
Yeah.
like drones, if you would, remotely observing and monitoring and things like that. And it makes more sense that a lot of these things could be potentially from a place where they actually are drones or surveillance kinds of things that are sending back information, doing monitoring or whatever they do, and they're collecting data or whatever their intent is. And that's also very much a reality with that kind of interpretation. You've also got the situation where we do have drones that are advancing around the country that we've are detecting around military ships and even in military facilities and ranges that I work with. I'm presently in the DoD, helping to assist us in implementing drone killing devices at all of our DoD locations. We have teams of people going around the country installing these drone killing kinds of technologies that will, number one, it'll knock the drone out of the air. It'll find out where the operator is, if it is one of those types, right? Our adversaries. And we're also testing and things like that, where we can take out drone swarms, if you would, like 100 drones come at you. We can knock them out and make them go dead. So we are doing that as well.
Don't you think in the very near future, there's going to be threats that we're all going to face from drones from other countries?
I don't doubt that one bit. There are already drones that are out there collecting intelligence data and sending it back to an adversary, even on our own planet. What I'm trying to tell you is that the problem we have is we have to be able to discriminate: is that a drone from an adversary, or is that a UAP from somewhere else? And how do you make the distinction?
Is that getting harder with the advances of our own technology and, to your point, the advances in drone technology? We didn't have to really worry about that maybe 20, 30 years ago.
Question.
Yeah, and as it is, and yes, we have to be concerned about it, and it's getting more challenging because for every time that they put a measure in place, and we try to put a countermeasure in place, they figure out how that they can make another measure. And so we have this ongoing battle between all of them to be able to see if we can't figure out how we're going to deal with that problem, right? It's not an easy task. Technology continues to advance, and people are out there doing the incredible work, and they have scientists just like we do. It's a problem. It's going to be a continual problem as we move forward.
I recall that I had dinner with somebody who was the head of the Space Command years ago, retired. His first name was Donald. And I was just really, he was setting up, they was partnering with a friend of mine to set up a space museum. And I just asked him, I said, are there any UFOs? And his answer, he looked at me in the eyes and he said, I'll answer your question straight up. He goes, there are no UFOs. That was his answer. And I went, oh. Meaning he gave me the impression, he didn't say it, he gave me the impression they knew what they were, or they could see them very clearly on radar or whatever kind of advanced radar. And you would probably know more than I would, obviously, in your line of work. But what do you think he meant by that answer?
I think that basically what he's saying is that we recognize that there are unidentifieds that are out there, that we just, again, he didn't say to you like, well, here's where they're from, or here's what he just basically said that we know that they're out there. We can track them. We can pick up them. We're able to do all that kind of stuff. And so they're no longer unidentified. They're known because we see them on our screens. We know that they're there, right?
Right.
And so I think that that's what his answer is. And I just can't believe that he was like saying, well, we know where they're from and we
No,
know everything about them. We don't know that.
He never spoke of it again.
Yeah.
That's all he said.
Yeah.
So he didn't break any of his, there was nothing he did wrong. He just said, there are no UFOs, period. Done.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not asking any more questions. We changed the topic, but it was really interesting. So where is your stand, and maybe some of your colleagues, at the coalition, about crashed saucers? Because there's obviously been a lot of them that have been reported, not as famous as Roswell, but you read about all these weird little ones that have seemed to have happened all over the world, actually. So where do you guys stand, and is there anything that you can do there?
So let me clarify that the 200 people that we have, of all the people that are on board, right? We're a coalition, which means that we're not actually all one think tank organization with everybody believing the same thing, right?
Right.
So everybody's got an opinion. Everybody's got some background with the subject of UFOs. Some don't have, actually, and just are curious. So you have a whole plethora of opinions about the subject of UFOs. Just as there are in the general population, right? Some of us have spent, a considerable time with it. And like, for example, I know we have people that have studied them for 20 years. We've got some that have been studying for 50 years or even longer. And of course, I've been with it for 58 years. So ultimately, there's a lot of variation in terms of those opinions, the notions about their understanding of the UFO subject. But they all bring something to the phenomena. And so I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that, it's not like we, SCU, have gone and investigated crashed UFOs.
Right.
Okay? We haven't done that. As a collective group, we have no projects that are out there looking at crashed UFOs. Do we know about them? Sure. I mean, I know about Roswell. I know about 200 of them. Len Stringfield documented in about 6 manuscripts that he had, where he covered basically all of the crash retrievals that he called them back in the late 70s. And I was aware of those crash retrieval cases that he collected. They were from a lot of different parts of the world. Actually, it's not all United States. It's some in other countries. Which, let me also go back to the point I kind of like brought you before, or we talked a little bit about. You could have a breakthrough technology from somebody over in China if they had a crashed UFO, couldn't they?
Yep.
So if they had a crashed UFO and they started reverse engineering it, like back in the whatever days, they might be able to use some of the materials or something like that to be able to figure something out that can do something. Or they might have a crashed one that actually was more intact than many of them. So it's conceivable you could have a country that's got a breakthrough kind of capability as a result of having a crash. So it's important that we consider crashes. And while we might not understand why they could crash if they were so capable of getting here or whatever, we still need to study it and be aware and be open-minded about it and look into any kind of cases to see if we can get that. I personally do believe that the government has got crashed UFOs, that it's had all along, and it's probably out with some actually like Lockheed Martin or something of that nature, and that allows them to avoid being under a FOIA or releasing any information about it. So they use the industries, and like I'm a defense contractor, they use contract companies to be able to have that kind of stuff and those materials. And if you took a look at, like, even in the Roswell crash, you realize that there were a variety of metals that the people said that they exhibited unusual properties. Well, one was that they would crumple it up in their hand, and then they open up their hand and it would spring back to its normal shape, right? Whatever that normal shape was. Mm-hmm. But yet it was a lightweight metal. Another one was you could take this lightweight metal and you couldn't hit it, you couldn't burn it, you couldn't burn it, you couldn't do all these different kinds of things to it. It was extremely strong, and it was not flexible like the other material. Well, take a look at that, and you start to follow the threads, and you find out that Battelle Memorial Institute in Columbus, Ohio, was working under contract for the Project Blue Book people and those other projects from the early days. And if you had some of this material, you could easily have it go to Battelle Memorial Institute, who, by the way, did a lot of studies on this kind of like metal that you can actually bend and it'll return to its shape. And it's called shape memory alloy. And basically what you have is a situation, it's now used in our glasses. You ever have metal glasses where you can bend it and it'll return to its shape, right? We've already incorporated it into being used in a whole other kinds of varieties of, aircraft. We use that shape memory alloy, and we use it in other kinds of things. And so you can have that same material that came out. And by the way, nitinol, which is nickel titanium alloy, right? Nickel titanium an alloy. Nitinol, NOL, is Navy Ordnance Labs. So guess who it got passed to help develop?
Who?
The Navy.
The Navy.
It's interesting.
So Doug, I mean, yeah, there's all kinds of like histories like that of materials that potentially we would take it if we would receive it. We would probably figure out how to re-engineer it or use it in some other means or shape or whatever for our own personal benefit. And right where I work on the Arsenal, there's an organization called MISIC, which is Missile Space Intelligence Center. So what does it do? It actually collects, we ship things that look like maybe missiles over to it. They tear it apart, re-engineer it, figure out what it's, how it works and what its functionality is and everything else. And they try to work on that and figure that out. Just like up in Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, you had the original was called ATIC, which was Air Technical Intelligence Center. Then it became Foreign Technology Division. And then it now is NASIC, which is National Air and Space Intelligence Center in Dayton, Ohio. And they're going to be now doing the studies on the UAP stuff for the government again. So,
Interesting.
You have all these.
Would you personally be willing to sign an NDA, or if someone was willing to open the junk drawer up and hand you a chunk of a UFO? I would imagine you would eagerly.
Oh, yeah. I've signed a lot of NDAs in my life working in the DOD for the last 26 years. But I mean, I would. I'm at the point now where I'm 71, going to be 71 this year. And I would like to be able to have answers before I die. I mean, who wouldn't, and I'm just thrilled and hoping that we can do something that will, I'll be able to be around long enough to see it. Right. And get some answers for myself. So especially since I spent most of my life working on this. I got started in 1964 when I was 13 years old.
Jeez. The weren't you on Phil Donahue when you were damn near, you were just a kid?
Yeah, I was 15 years old when I went on with him.
Jeez.
15 years old. That was a pretty incredible time. He was actually in Dayton. There was a station there called, I think it was WLWD or something. I can't remember now. It's been a long time ago. But and this is before he went to Chicago and really got famous, and stuff like that. But in Dayton, he got his start. And I was around town doing lectures on UFOs all the time, the Sertomas clubs, Kiwanis clubs, at age 15, right? I'm giving lectures on the subject of UFOs. And
I can imagine how brilliant you were at a young age.
Well, I don't know about that, but anyway, from age 13 on, I just had an intense focus on this. And when I found out that there was a project that was called Project Blue Book in the city of Dayton, I worked my way into being able to see if I could even become a part of it. Hoo-ha! But I was too young yet, right? But the interesting thing is now, right? So I'm okay. Let me give you the corollary here. Project Blue Book was a project underneath the the Air Force Material Command. I'm working at the Army Material Command, right? So I'm this. Anyway, it's kind of a funny story, but nevertheless, I'm right there with it.
I've got a million questions. Rich is burning. So we're not going to let you go. We're going to keep you for like 6 hours. Okay.
All right.
He's joking. Well, I mean, he's you know.
Tell me. Okay. Do you guys ever find or do you keep track of weather data and UFO sightings? Because I mean, I'm fortunate to live in an area. There's so many sightings in our area. I don't know why, but we always take note of like tonight's. It's usually a very calm, moderate night when we do have a sighting of some type. Mainly it's orbs, you know, these orbs you described that look very, because they never act erratically, but they're quite low. So I know they're not a satellite. In many cases, they're red. Sometimes they're blue, sometimes they're orange. And they just kind of go about their business in a kind of a straight line. But they're always slow, but we always see them when it's really moderate weather.
So let me, that's an interesting point. Let me just bring up and tell you about because I got together with a lot of the people who are studying the, around the world, basically, with people who are all looking into the Earth-light phenomena. Remember, I was telling you about Florence, Alabama over here, Cloverdale, little community. So you have witnesses going back to 1973 who were seeing, guess what? Red, blue, and the orange lights. Okay.
Oh, by the way, I'm just going to add one thing and you're going to continue. Sorry to interrupt. We just saw 2 pink ones, bright Pepto-Bismol pink that were like, they glow, day glow pink. They saw 2 of them and they were at an angle and they were quite low, maybe 300 feet up, and they came right to the car and then one blinked off and one took off. Those were the only orb-like things I'd ever seen that seemed like they were under intelligent control. So go ahead. So
bottom line is that the colors match what you just talked about. Okay, they seemingly, you know, are a situation where in some places they can actually shoot instantaneously straight up. A lot of them are like near the ground and gradually move up, and they can get up to 2,000 feet altitude, be moving across the sky, right? So you have that kind of thing going on as well. You also have the situation where it seems like in warmer months that they're like toward the red color, and maybe you might see the blue as well. And in the colder months, you'll see the orange. The red and blues tend to be about 3 to 4 feet in diameter, while the orange ones are about 8 foot in diameter.
I didn't know they were that big. That's crazy. How did you determine size?
Well, I'll get to that. So
Great.
Let me give an example. So what we did was basically looked at cases, and what we've seen in the past, even in MUFON cases that I when I was doing the director work there. For example, let me give you one. A red object is now moving. It's a relatively small object. It basically comes now over from the side as a car is going down a highway at 65 miles an hour. And the red object then comes over and starts to move around the car. And it goes from one side of the car to the other side of the car, and it's moving around it as though it were somehow like connected to the car, if you would. And then eventually the red light then just moves behind the car and it's gone. And the person was pretty freaked out about that. Okay, so that's an example there. We measured the size of the object on a train track, where you had a train that was coming from behind the witness that was basically like looking at it, and you could see its measurement in relationship to the actual the train track itself. And then in addition, when the train then comes up and goes next to this thing, it's almost like it gets magnetically connected to the train and starts moving with the train.
Oh, okay.
So what we question is whether or not there's some sort of a magnetic connection that's set up between the metal object and that kind of a ball of gas. And let me tell you, we've now got spectral images of the Earth-light phenomena that tell us what gases that it's made up of.
Okay. So
it's made up, and let me
Well, I'm
So
just
you're
going to
in
back
that.
up. Tell everybody what multispectral lighting is.
Well, a spectral, if you take a what they call a diffraction grating and you put that on a camera lens, you can get the spectrum. You'll see it, the light from whatever the object is broken into the spectrum. So
Okay.
we have spectrum analysis software, which then allows you to go in and see what chemicals or elements that are present on the periodic table that each have spectral kinds of like relationships and certain patterns. And so we're able to deduce that, and they do this with astronomy as well. You can actually look at the light from a star and figure out what its gases are,
Okay.
or elements that you see there. In fact, that's one of the things that they're doing to be able to see if they can determine whether it's got life. Is you can look for like ozone, or you can look for certain kinds of things up there that would potentially give you an indication that there's life. But nevertheless, so we took the light from like in Hessel, Norway, and you break it into the spectrum and you find out what the gases are, and you find out that it's nitrogen, oxygen, typical things in the atmosphere, right? Then you also find out that it's got iron. That's magnetic. And then you have sulfur. You have an interesting thing called yttrium or scandium. Scandium those are two, yttrium and scandium are right, one's right above the other on the periodic table. They're both rare earth transition metals. And scandium, for example, is used in Hollywood to take a nighttime scene and make it look like daylight. So it illuminates, right? It illuminates things. So in the right constituent, parts of that ball of like belched gas, if you would, that's spherical or something like that, you can get basically that kind of a glowing that might occur from the scandium somehow igniting, and it now allows you to see that visibly. And let me also point out to you, these things could be out during the day and you might not see them. At the same time, at nighttime, they tend to last maybe like 10 to 20 minutes and then they disappear. They're gone. In addition to that, let me also point out to you, they're unidirectional in terms of their light, many cases. In other words, if I had one that flew between you and I right now, I might see the object and you don't see it because you're on like what dark side of it, right? It doesn't show you light. Okay. Another example, in Piedmont, Missouri, you had the one scientist, Dr. Harley Rutledge, who looked at it, who had people on the ground seeing it, but the guy flying in the plane couldn't see it from above. So lighting, it could be unidirectional. It could actually go out and then it could come back on because it's maybe rotating, or you've got the side or whatever like that where it's lit. And so that's another characteristic of the Earth light phenomena. So again, it's like one of those things where it's easily misunderstood to be a UAP or UFO. And we need to get rid of that as a potential, so we can discriminate those and the actual UAP, like a Tic Tac, or something like that.
Super interesting. I don't think I've ever had orbs explained.
Yeah, and so there's not a lot of people that really are getting into them scientifically, as scientists haven't looked into them really well. There's a number of authors who have written about it. William Corliss is one. There's a Yakima case. You got I can't remember the name of the author of that book, but Yakima, Washington had him. Piedmont, Missouri, there was a Dr. Harley Rutledge, a scientist who went down and did that in 1973 in those cases. You've got, Erling Strand in Hessel in Norway, who's conducting research and experiments. He's been doing that for a long, long time. So again, there are all these different people that are out there doing the studies, and there's a number of books on it, but it's not commonly understood, and it's not even being talked about by the general public. And so it's just a UFO, right? Because they're uneducated about what's up in the sky.
So I've got one I want to tell you about that me and Yvette both saw. We were driving down just, on the road near the airport. And as we were heading north on that road, an orb that was sparking had sparks coming off it. Floated over the car, maybe 10 feet up, so you could clearly see it. Floated over the car, but it was changing colors from, chartreuse, blue, red, yellow, and then kind of cycling through. But the sparks, it looked like something out of Buck Rogers. Floated over the car and then went into the woods. And she's like, well, let's follow it. And I'm like, are you nuts? It just looked as creepy as anything I've ever seen. Have you ever heard reports of sparking orbs?
I haven't heard of sparking orbs. Yeah, that's usually when you see something that's sparking, it could be, the only thing you can think about is like, debris coming off of a fireball, which that's about it. Other than an aircraft that's breaking up or something of that nature, there's nothing like sparks.
It's going over 5 miles an hour. So certainly,
yeah,
it was
not in an orb. We've not seen or heard of that kind of thing, and we've got like many hundreds of cases of orbs we've looked into.
Yeah, well, there's one for you. Whether you believe me or not, but it was great. I had a witness, because if I wouldn't have believed it.
I don't doubt you saw it, Doug. I just have no explanation for it.
It's just interesting, though. The variety. There was an orb too that we saw. We were on the deck in broad daylight. We're just laying in the sun. We're in our bathing suits, laying in the sun, and Yvette's watching this object that's black, kind of a round ball, going around the pine tree in our yard. We live on a lake, by the way. And we just thought, she thought, well, maybe it was somebody had a party and it's a balloon. It's black. But it goes around the tree a couple of times and heads over to the deck. And she still hasn't said anything to me. I'm just laying there with my eyes closed, enjoying the weather. And all of a sudden, she sees it, and she sees it changing shape. She said she jumped back, and then it jumped back as if it was as shocked as she was. And then, of course, she screamed, and that's when, of course, I saw it. And I looked over and grabbed my cell phone. It's still there, and it was changing shape. And I swung my cell phone over, and it shot up to the clouds. Then I filmed it, did get footage of it, and then we went inside to look at the footage to get away from the bright sunlight. Came back out, and here was another one coming out of the lake, or it could have been the same one. Came out of the lake and shot straight up to the clouds. And Alex, I sent you that footage. Do you have it?
Oh, you emailed it to me?
Oh yeah, you didn't even see it, did you? I forgot to remind you of it.
That's no problem. I can pull it up while you guys are talking.
We can keep talking. But it's things like that I went and investigated. Why was it going around that tree twice? So I go out there. There was a parasitic tree growing around the pine tree that had wrapped itself and was choking this little, maybe an 8-foot pine tree. And I just thought to myself, well, maybe that's what it was doing. It was confused by, what it was looking at. Couldn't identify the tree because it was two trees into one. I couldn't come up with any explanation. Why would it go around that pine tree? And what was it doing?
Yeah.
And once again, the footage is actually pretty detailed. I'm a filmmaker, so first thing I always think about is trying to get footage of it. So
a lot of people do, and in fact, most witnesses that I've talked to over the decades I've been dealing with it, they're basically, number one, they're seeing something that they can't explain. They're trying to go through in their mind, what could it be? Could it be this? Could it be that? Could it be, you try to rationalize it the best you can, and then you're stuck with the fact that it did something that was relatively weird, and then you say, well, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I don't know what I'm looking at. And there are some people who will immediately grab a camera if they're lucky enough to have one. And in the early days, remember, we didn't have cell phones.
Exactly.
So it was like, if you had your box Brownie camera, you might be able to find something, and hopefully you had negative film in it or something of that nature. But
cell phones are almost useless for getting UFOs because of the little tiny wide angle lens. Objects.
Cell phones don't really yield much. In fact, a lot of people are just doing it just to be able to think that they're getting something that's of value. Scientifically, it's not of value, and ultimately, you have a lot of other kinds of things that are going on where it could be like, a lot of them are lens flares, because they're pointing at a bright object like the sun, or they're at some sort of light, and they get that little blue orb down in there that moves around, and then and then they want to report it as UFO, and they send in their blue orbs, which are nothing more than lens flares.
Yep, I had a guy send me one recently, and I said, no, that's just an artifact of the lens.
Yeah, so we get that, and if you, and then you have today, you've got millions of wannabe filmmakers that are sitting there with their computers, which are pretty capable right now, and they can do CGI, and they create videos, and they put them up on YouTube, and here's this fake video that I created, and I'm hoping to get a clickbait and everything else on it, and there you go. And so there's a lot of those out there, and so
Rich, sorry to interrupt, but just to speak on that, with the challenges your organization is facing, is it data collection or is it data integrity? With all the ability to hoax stuff now, like to your point with special effects getting so easy for literally anyone with a laptop to do, or drones and stuff like that.
Alex, you're spot on. Okay, so the problem where we don't spend our time, we're not going to do like MUFON does, where I submit my report and my fake video or something like that, and then I now take the time up of an investigator. I'm not sending in a blue orb. I'm not going to do that. I told you SCU is about the fact that we're looking at instrumented studies with cameras that are more capable to be able to see if we can collect infrared. We can look at other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum. We can look at type of devices out there where you're capable of picking up like acoustic data. I'm now these things are reported as being silent, but guess what? Is it just because they're above our human hearing or below our human hearing?
Yeah.
So let's use the acoustic tools to be able to pick up at these other ranges to see that. That's what we're investigating. We're not going to spend our time looking into what people do with their cell phones, which don't give us any kind of where's the location, what's the time of day. There's no reference point for anything to be able to determine its size or its altitude or anything of that nature. And so, or it's just a light that's moving across a dark screen because they're doing it at night. And so cell phones are not going to work. Sorry, we're not going to waste our time on that. We appreciate the fact that, it might be confirming for you because, you can see that you can go to somebody, I saw something weird and it did this. And I appreciate that. Okay. But we're not going to spend time on that because we want to be able to get some of those better data cases. So data integrity is one, because you have to know where it's coming from. You have to be able to account for that, where it came from. In fact, if you're aware of the fact that Jacques Vallée had passed on materials over to Gary Nolan, and he's looking into them from an he's analyzing those kinds of tools to see if there's isotopic ratios that are different than you would find here on the planet Earth. The problem is the provenance. Where did it come from? How was it handled? Where was it when they first had it? And many of these things are like from old cases, and he's had it in his box over here for a long time. Well, that's not good enough,
Now, Rich, are with this data collection, is everything going into like a centralized database with as many data points as possible to
so
try to cross-reference all these?
If you have multiple types of equipment, we're actually taking it and putting it into a database, if you would, yes, where we can take a look at that database and we can start to analyze some of those things and patterns, see if we get any patterns. In the case of when you have like the UAPX thing where they had like something like 60 different pieces of equipment out there.
Wow.
Obviously got some that are FLIR cameras, some that are, like normal visual range kinds of like cameras. There's a lot of data you get from all these different devices. And you have to then look at synchronization in terms of the time. We saw this strange object at this time. Well, was this camera's time set correctly? Was that camera set correctly? And then can you actually converge it and make sure that that's what you're dealing with is the clock synchronization?
Well, we just had a guest on last week, Justin, right? And his time was set wrong. So obviously he knew the correct time. But yeah, if you were just given that boilerplate, you wouldn't have maybe known that. And just sorry to interrupt, Rich, but no. I was able to find that clip, Doug.
Oh,
so
Yeah, it's just real quick. Just to go ahead and play it. But this thing was right by my head, 5 feet from my head during the day. And it was blacker than black. And it looked, I mean, it changed from oval to diamond to round right in front of both of us. Really weird. And then it shot up. It wasn't very big. I mean, it was probably basketball size.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And there's just a still of it now. I don't know what it was. I have no idea. But it was interesting that one came out of the lake. Broad daylight. So, you know.
It looks like it's moving at a relatively slow, a straight line trajectory. It didn't make any kind of crazy turns or anything of that nature.
But actually, it does bob and turn. I had to shorten the footage to be able to equal it to Alex. But yeah, it does turn, it does curve, and it does do a lot of changes shape too.
I'd be interested in seeing that more, Doug. If you could share that with me, I'd like to look at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks very interesting. I don't know. It looks like it has on this image.
Yeah.
That it's got some sort of like projection coming out of it, like that there's like a line or something like that coming up on that one end. I don't know what that's about, but
I don't either, because I didn't. When it was close, all we saw was this. We could actually see the texture on it too, which was very interesting. It looked like kind of like a bunch of triangles, basically, all interconnected. But it was breathing. I mean, it was getting bigger and smaller and changing shapes. It was really weird. Couldn't get a handle on it, what I was looking at.
Yeah.
And I was just shocked that it got up to the cloud so quick. And I sent it to AW Research Labs, and he did studies on it. He said it was doing 120 knots at its quickest speed. So anyhow, go ahead, Alex, get rid of that.
So I was gonna say, with the data collection you're doing, Rich, so many sightings still have to be someone sees something that's in the sky at night, right? Like, they're not maybe formal researchers, or maybe they even are, but they don't have the equipment set up and ready to go. You know what I mean? Because these things catch you off guard. Like, Doug, you were just out and about when this thing, right, just shot out of the water. So I guess, like, how are you just limiting yourself to maybe people that are, going out with a bunch of equipment to try to cross-reference this, or like, what's the methodology there for dealing with the fact that a lot of this data is off the cuff?
I guess what you're asking, how can a citizen scientist go out and maybe get some useful data for you guys?
Yeah, and help you guys out.
Yeah. Okay. So, let me clarify that there are a number of tools that people can use even on your cell phone. Let me clarify what I'm talking about. Number one, if your cell phone is relatively a good one, like maybe like a current model, obviously you know that the cameras are improving, right?
Absolutely.
There is a software that you can or an app that you can download, which it's called Theodolite. Theodolite is Theodolite, and that is one where it's got a camera on it, but it's got more than that. If you take a look at the screen around Theodolite, you'll find out that it can tell you your bearing that you're looking at. It can also give GPS coordinates of where you're standing and where you're looking at. Okay, it can also give you angular size, and you can do triangulation on it. And it gives you a lot more data that you can then do something with. And if people would use Theodolite as that would be extremely helpful, because it does give data that is helpful to science, right? It also gives you the camera settings that you've got, all that wonderful information. So Theodolite is one tool that I recommend a lot of people use if they're a witness in taking these images. Obviously, with the better cameras, that's the better way to do it. If you have, in case, like, for example, like Doug's mentioning, he's got a lot of these things that are going on in that area. Well, again, a spectral image of that object would be extremely helpful, if at night, especially, if you can capture the light coming from it. And all you got to do is you can buy a little diffraction grating that you can mount on the front of the camera, and it would now split the light, so you could do a spectral analysis of that, right?
Interesting.
So that would be extremely helpful, and that's better than you taking a visible range image of it. So,
by the way, sorry to interrupt, Rich. Is this the app? Did I get this right?
yeah. If you zoom in on, or if you can see those photos, for example, you'll see that there's actual metadata around the screen.
Super cool.
You can actually see the angle you're holding the camera up at and looking at the image. You've got other comparisons in the thing you can do. You can actually use trigonometry to be able to calculate the altitude, the size of the object, and everything else. So that's extremely important. Okay, that's one little tool. But let me give you another example. And that is that, I can conduct a complete investigation with you if you've got a cell phone and I have a cell phone, by you just doing FaceTime with me, right?
Yep.
I have tools on my cell phone. These are apps that are available that can tell me the satellites directly above you. I can see aircraft that are directly above you using Flight Radar 24 or something of that nature. I can also take and look at the weather and any of the astronomy kinds of tools and apps that I've got. I can look at all those different kinds of factors, and I can actually record that and see a lot of things that will help me to deduce that, number one, could that be an aircraft flying over? And I showed the people that are investigators, other MUFON investigators, how I could actually conduct an investigation just by using my cell phone. That if you think about when I got started, you had pencil and paper and you had people completing a form, and that's all that we had. Yep. There were no cell phones, no computers, no nothing. Okay. So now I can do a complete look at that. What's up in the sky? In fact, I could say, well, wait a minute. Hey, Doug, can you see that there's an aircraft that's down toward your cell? I can look on Google Earth and see where you're standing, by the way. You see your tree that's there? I mean, the tree in front of you. Okay, you're right behind it, right? And you're looking at this direction, So again, there are these kind of like ways of doing things that you can make it so that you can help investigators remotely do an investigation of what's going on around you, right?
Very cool. That's really helpful. I mean, this is all very new information, Rich.
Yeah. Well, I'm one of those guys that have been researching and investigating it for a long time, so that's why I've got the gray hair, right?
But the point is, you're just so open and willing to share all this stuff. It's amazing.
Oh, sure, yeah. I in fact, I'd like to be able to have more meaningful data from citizens, other than just blurry kind of lights up in the sky of nighttime shots. And really see something that I could do something with, and we can really find out a lot more about.
Have you ever investigated daytime UFO swarms? These either round objects that have been recorded. Actually, I mean, I was amazed at how much footage there is of these swarms. And what are they? I have no idea. I've seen it myself right here. We had a swarm of UFOs right over our house. And we did get footage of it. Not only did we get footage, it completely destroyed my phone. I mean, just completely destroyed it. And so Yvette was filming too.
Yeah.
And she didn't start filming until they were a little farther off. And then her phone survived. Mine totally turned into a brick.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to point out to you, it's nice if you have multiple witnesses, and if you can look at like somebody you knew or that was on the other side of the lake, if you could call them up and say that you could triangulate now and get the exact altitude of the object, because you're all taking that from your respective points, right? Yep. So that's the important thing. If Doug, if you're going to have that frequency of sightings, right, in your area, then hey, by all means, start thinking about that from the standpoint of how can you utilize other people to help you to do that. And that lends a lot more scientific.
So if we could send you 2 videos,
at the same time from 2 different positions, I just need to know your positions.
That'd be very cool.
Use the theodolite, I'd be able to know your position, the bearing, I'd be able to know a whole lot of other details, right?
I've had people come here that claim they'd never seen a UFO in their life. First day I say, well, come over here. Numerous times, the first, including Alan Sibidar, who was 55 years old and a pilot, had never seen a UFO, comes over here. He's here 5 minutes. He's checking all the radar. He's a pilot, so he's doing everything. And he goes, "Oh my God, I just saw my first UFO." I said, "Well, I told you to come over here a long time ago." And
in 58 years, I've never seen one either.
I was going to ask you, that's one of my questions.
Well, you have to come over, Rich.
Minneapolis, Rich, come on over. A cup of coffee, and I've got thermal cameras and all sorts of stuff. And I'm a lazy guy, because I use this stuff for work. And so if I'm going to go enjoy my Star Watch and look on the deck and whatever, I'm just kind of, whatever. No one's going to care anyhow. And so I enjoy it. But yeah, I've never even broke my thermal camera out. Is that something that's useful in UFO investigations?
Sure.
Thermal cameras, they are?
Yeah, I mean, so let me give you an example of that. If you look at the Tic Tac video, or if you look at the Aguadilla video that we put up there, the Aguadilla case, these are objects that are not giving you any kind of a thermal signature that's normal to any other object, right? In other words, if you look at the Tic Tac and you see that the setting, now these are cameras that are military grade equipment. Okay, so I mean, these are millions of dollars worth of piece of equipment, and they're very capable. They can sense 1/100th of a degree variance. That's how sensitive they are. And so they're giving you a thermal image of what it is. And you can see, for example, that many of these objects are extremely cold compared to other things, and they're not heating up from traveling in the atmosphere like we think of. They're not heating up, and you can tell that from a thermal image.
So are they cold, Rich, or are they warm? Are they just
they're
the air temperature?
A lot of them are basically like colder than the air temperature.
Interesting.
If you look at them, and so they don't seemingly heat up. In the Aguadilla case, where the settings were that black represents hot, it did heat up a little bit. In fact, we were able to measure the temperature of the object, not at some points where it was about 104 degrees. Now that's not cold, okay? But what I'm trying to tell you is that the object even went in the water, came out of the water, and it split into two objects, and they both had different signatures, thermal signatures. And the object, well, we were able to tell it was 104 because we were able to look at cows that were in the image or in the video and measure. We actually have studies that showed the temperature of a cow is roughly a little over 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And we could match the colors. We separated the white to gray colors for each of the pixels, and we were able to determine that they matched up with certain temperatures. So our study gets into how we measured the temperature of the object.
That's interesting. So more likely than not, they're cool.
Yes, and there are cases now. I'm just going to come back, for example, where you have microwave radiation. I mentioned that baking of soil, right? So obviously it's emitting that kind of a microwave kind of like heat, if you would, or it's causing, not like you could feel the heat, but anyway, it's definitely the heat hot. And then you have other areas or other cases that if you look at, I think it's Carl Find who wrote books on the UFOs and water and some of the effects there where you see some steam. So maybe the field around it is creating a heat. If you look at the Tic Tac case, the Lieutenant Commander Slate, who was the WISO, the weapons systems officer in the other aircraft with Fravor, he was Alex Dietrich was the pilot, and he was in the back seat. When the object came up and Fravor had been maneuvering around the object and it split across, as it came up to about where they were in their altitude, he could make out that there was like a kind of like an effect, like a mirage-like effect around the object. And that mirage-like effect indicates that it's probably something where it's actually stimulating or interacting with the atmosphere, which means that also you could see that potentially that these things are interacting with the atmosphere and heating up. And when you have the object, for example, in the landing case, if you would, where they might have had that outer field around it, it was interacting with our atmosphere and creating maybe some heat potential to it. That actually now that is what's baking the soil. And if you look at the Kansas or the Delphos, Kansas case, where you talked about the hydrophobic soil, right? The object was not on the ground, it was above the ground, and it created a ring-like effect of that hydrophobic area, a ring. Well, it's because the field was around the object, and if you think about a sphere going below the ground, it's now creating what would be an appearance of a ring, right?
Really interesting. Yeah, that was a real intriguing case. Wasn't there some white powdery type substance that was seen? Was that ever determined what that was?
I believe that was analyzed. We have a number of people that are in SCU. Phyllis Budinger, I believe, is one of the ones that actually did some lab work on that.
Fulvic acid or something?
Yeah, well, there was like some sort of like also a fungi or something in the ground that was actually activated. That was something that was there. I know that there's a number of books, and I haven't read them in a while. I'm sorry, I don't remember all the details, but yes, there were chemical studies that were done on that soil, and they did find some unusual characteristics about the soil, and obviously the hydrophobic thing is one of them.
Have you ever been privy to, not that you're going to answer me, but have you seen any NASA stuff? Because obviously there's no doubt they've filmed certain things that they've seen out in space from the space station or the space shuttle. Have you seen anything that intrigued you?
Yeah, well, I think that there's a number of them that I know that are very credible. I mean, we have over here on Redstone Arsenal, we also have the Marshall Space Flight Center, and I've got a lot of friends that work over at Marshall and the NASA side. And I'm glad that NASA is actually now engaging in the study of the UFOs as well. I'm glad that they're doing that. We've encouraged that for a long, long time. But anyway, going back to the videos, there's a lot of people that will take and this is again the problem, Doug. You have the people that want to be creators of CGI images and stuff like that who will take NASA sites and will do something and manipulate it, and they'll put that up there. And actually, it's CGI that they've added to the video, and they'll get a live feed and they'll record it and then they'll add the stuff later. So we have that problem. Number two, you also have the situation where you're taking a camera that's on the inside of an instrumented craft that's
looking
got
through a window,
instrument panels behind it.
Yep.
And you're looking through thick glass,
Yep.
and you have interior reflections now of objects or lighting things that are on the back that are also now coming through. So you have that problem. You also have the problem where there might be ice particles and other debris that's in space, and people are picking up the debris or the ice particles and wanting to call that. So you have to legitimately look at every one of these things and investigate it to the nth degree.
Yeah.
And then figure out what it is. But we do know that astronauts have seen things that they could not identify, that were also validated by people on the ground at NASA, where they call down and say, hey, we got this object there. We don't show anything. And when you have space tracking capabilities to be able to even see some object the size of a wrench in space, then it's very concerning that you have a spacecraft and you're seeing an object out there and you're recording it, that it's there, and you don't have anything that you have, or you're not aware of it, whatever that object is. So I believe that astronauts have seen things. I don't necessarily believe in all of the videos being, what
but
they...
is there one that does intrigue you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a number of them. And in fact, if you see there was a show, I think that was called what is it? NASA Files or something like that. I've got a friend of mine by the name of Mark D'Antonio who is off and on TV, and he's a good friend of mine. He's in MUFON. He was the actual photo analyst. He talks about some of those cases and mentions some of those that are pretty incredible. And I do believe that they also have more that they have not revealed.
Of course.
You know, I mean, they're just not sharing it, and there's nothing compelling them to share it. You know, and that's part of the problem you run into.
Is there anyone that you can point to that somebody could look up and maybe posted on the internet or online that you do find intriguing?
I don't know how to tell somebody that one particular video.
Okay.
Maybe I could send a list or something like that, and you guys could do it that way. But,
yeah, if there's
but,
a specific video you think is intriguing.
Yeah, there's a number of them that I've seen that are compelling cases. None that I've actually investigated, and I can't. It's just me and my opinion, right?
Yep. So tell us more about what NASA, because I read they're going to study UAPs. What can you kind of elaborate?
Well, again, it's one of those things where they're trying to put up. They've got now two parts of the organization that have come together that they're going to actually now try to figure out and set up a structure to be able to have reporting and collect the information and the data. And so there are two leads that have been identified for NASA's study. We've been trying to connect into see if we can get connected with them. We've actually had I guess an email where we've reached out to talk with them to let them know that we're here, SCU is, and that we'd be happy to work with them in any capacity. And there was a discussion about us potentially being able to educate them in the subject a little bit, give them a head start. At the same time, a lot of these organizations within the government are still in the early phases of setting up their structure and the reporting processes. So until they get a lot of these details identified and stuff like that, it's going to be kind of like, for the general public, they're not going to really hear much about it. But now that they're going to commit funds to it, that they're actually going to put resources and people together and see if they can come up with a strategy, then that's encouraging, and that's what we want.
Yeah, that's got to be exciting for you to see this stuff.
Oh my God, you just, I mean, let me put it to you this way, Doug. When I told you I got started at age 13, and I was running Project Blue Book. When Project Blue Book closed in '69, it's like I felt like my legs were cut out from underneath me. It's like, well, there's nothing to it. The Kahn report and the National Academy of Sciences said that, don't spend any money or time on UFO papers. Don't do a research paper. Don't do a journals. Scientists need to just discontinue that. There's nothing to it. There's no threat to the United States. It's not worthy of study. I mean, I was like, well, okay, well, I'm certainly not being validated by anybody in the government that that these witnesses I'm talking with are seeing anything legitimate, and that's very discouraging because I've had a lot of these conversations with witnesses right after the event who are pretty well shook up by what they've seen. And they know clearly that it was some object that was disc-shaped, hanging, like 5 feet away from them, and that would change their whole world. And so, this is like saying, well, it's all just a bunch of junk. Don't waste your time on it. And now, now think about it. 2017, we get the announcement. Now we got the Pentagon saying that UFOs are real. We got people that are actually committing it. Now the Congress is engaged and the whole government's engaged now and stuff like that. I'm going like, wow, why couldn't we have had this 58 years ago when I got started with it, right? And where we've been sleeping on this whole thing. And, and we still have the problem that this is a national security, organization. DOD is about national security. I have to sign non-disclosures, and I work for the government, and I've classified stuff that I can't talk about and everything else, and a whole bunch of other people. But nevertheless, it's a situation where, to me, I'm seeing those changes happen. You can have a conversation in a military hallway now about the subject where you couldn't before. We got scientists that are coming out of the closet now and wanting to engage, and we're, SCU is growing. I'm at the peak of my life, right?
Yeah, you're just starting.
Yeah.
You're just now starting, Rich.
Yeah.
So you're optimistic about the future direction of where things are starting to go.
Yes, I am. I think, it's about damn time that the government spends some time and consider this serious enough to do something about it, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, whether we will probably get some answers down the pike is what the general public, I guess what I'm trying to say, and they'll at least be able to eliminate the fact that these are not Soviet, they're not Chinese, they're not somewhere else. And they're going to have to come to the same conclusion that many of us already did, decades ago, and say, well, we don't know where they're from. And then now let's figure out where in the hell they're from. Let's figure out a way to do that, right? And see if we can't monitor it. And so now they can commit money and time and energy and resources and really do that, with the public now saying, yay, yeah. Glad to see we're finally doing something about it. And at least if we get monthly reports or periodic reports, that would be good. We're encouraging that they actually work with academia and us, people like us, where we can actually help support them in their study.
Do you think that they might have continued that research, but they were afraid of a mass panic, like a War of the Worlds type situation? That radio broadcast for people.
Yeah. Back in the early days when I got started with it, I was concerned about that. And I think that they were too, when early days of Project Blue Book. In fact, if you look at there was this thing called the RAND study, and the RAND study was ultimately looking at the cultural impacts if you made an announcement about this topic, right?
How people would react.
And you still today have a lot of people that, for example, first off, not everybody will report a UFO. Okay, they don't report them. The vast majority of them are not reported at all, and those might see
them.
I've never reported one ever.
Yeah, right. So, Doug, you've had sightings. You never reported it to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I'm trying to tell you is, I believe that there's a lot more that are being seen that people are not talking about than there collectively are that are being reported.
Absolutely.
And the strangeness index that we know about, which means that the stranger the story gets, the less likely that I'm going to tell you or anybody else about my case, because you're going to call me a kook, right? So you also have the fact that you have religious groups who are out there that will not accept anything other than demon. You have, it's demonic, and don't spend any time on that. And I'm never going to tell you about a sighting that I had. You also have some people that are still the stigma of this whole thing. I'm not going to tell my family because they'll call me kooks or whatever like that, and they won't talk to me anymore. It's uncomfortable to talk about. So you have so many obstacles that are out there yet that people will not actually get out and report their cases. And those might be even some of the better cases, right? Okay, so that's a problem for us. And that stigma is slowly changing with the fact that you can now hear about the subject of UAPs a lot more today than you could 20 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
So what level do you think the government, some people in the government, a few, know about these things? Do you think it's just way greater than your knowledge, Rich? Or do you think they're just as confused as we all are?
I think generally, with the exception of probably a few people in the entire government who are under some sort of they're working in a special access program. They've got, if they swear to God, say anything, their lives will be in jeopardy. There's a few of those people probably out there that have a little bit more information and answers. But the general, citizens, general everyday citizens I live around work at the base. That doesn't mean that every one of those people working at the base have any interest in this subject or even know about it or have any awareness of it. So what you always hear about, well, the government is keeping this, whatever, the government is the bad person or whatever. You can't collectively generalize to every one of us, because there's a lot of us that are very much should like to be able to learn more, because it's compartmentalized and it's top secret and stuff like that. We're not going to get any answers either, right? So that's the problem, that you run into with the classification and the national security requirements that we sign. So you don't have anybody with all the answers, or if there are, they're very, very few. And so that's what I'm going to tell you, is that there's a lot of us that would like to know more. In fact, we converse about it on, DoD systems as well, and top secret kind of systems and have conversations. But ultimately, it's we're all puzzled. We don't know. We don't have any answers.
Yeah.
Nobody has any answers either. They're just as curious about what this thing is. And think about it. You know, why would the Air Force want to get out of Project Blue Book studying UFOs? Because guess what? The indications are that we're not in charge of our skies.
Yeah.
How do I expect you to give me funding from the public if I'm not in charge of the skies and defending our skies, right?
Right.
Yeah, if we're helpless in some cases.
You know, I mean,
Which
so
we probably are helpless.
yeah, so there you go. And then you're dealing with objects where if you fire at them or you shoot at them, and you look at those cases where we try to shoot at them, well, the objects are going hypersonic speeds instantaneously. What the hell do you want to fire at one for? You can't shoot it down. It's going to, in fact, I'll point out something to you, and that is we believe that they're almost like somehow they precognitively know what we're going to do before we're going to do it.
Spooky.
And if you look at the Nimitz case, you'll see a couple indications of where that may be the case. So I keep coming back to that Nimitz case because it's well documented. We spent years. We wrote a 277-page paper. We interviewed 18 witnesses. 18 people aboard those ships and the planes. So we got a little bit firsthand knowledge when we put our report together on our website, right? And my point to you is that if you take a look at what happened with Fravor, Commander Fravor, when he started diving down toward where the Tic Tac was, number one, it knew what he was going to do, and it started to come up, and it did a parallel circle with him, circle dance, and they were going like this. And then before he tried to cut across that, and the object already knew that he was going to cut across the circle, and reacted, and it came up, and it shot off, and where did it go? It went to his cap point, which is where he was going to go next.
Have you ever studied the Phoenix Lights? Because that was kind of the opposite of a Tic Tac. It was maybe a collection of Tic Tacs, or it was a big giant solid object. Is that something, there's any data that you guys can look at from?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, again, it's like, it's a lot of like camera photos and things from different angles, and it's not really going to get, there were some movie films and stuff like that. I happen to believe that the Phoenix Lights were definitely an unknown object that went across the city. I don't doubt that one bit. You had thousands of people saw it, and it certainly wasn't that ridiculous thing about the flares being dropped off Luke Air Force Base, and some of those people. Yeah, they did drop flares and stuff like that, but it was much later time than when people were seeing the actual object that when it went by.
Yeah.
And when the object did go by, there were points that indicated that it was solid because they couldn't see stars behind it when it went across, right? So you have that kind of thing going on.
What
the object?
Well, I'm curious what your estimates are on the width of this thing, the size, because it was astronomically big, wasn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it was astronomically big. It was bigger than definitely an aircraft that we have. I mean, in terms of its wingspan, or its width, if you would. And so, I mean, it was definitely much larger than that. I don't know the exact size, but I do know that it was larger than a typical one of our larger aircraft. And and the fact that it had no, sound, again, no kind of like indications. Again, it was moving across the sky. How did it do that? And then when it shot off at a pretty quick speed too. So.
Yeah, it's just an amazing story. I went down to Phoenix with Stanton Friedman on that one. So it was real interesting. I met a lot of witnesses too down there. Pretty cool.
I see that somebody's talking about Corbell in terms of releasing another doc, in the Navy witnesses. Can I comment on that?
Yes.
Yeah, please do.
Yeah. So the situation is that, what we don't need to do, and I'll just say it on this show because I really believe this. What we don't need to do is release videos from a filmmaker on this subject until the sightings are investigated or anything of that nature. The reason being is because I think that that's the wrong way. It's sending the wrong message. That I send it to a journalist and they put it up and they do it. And then they come along. If we investigate it later on and find out that it's nothing more than a drone or it's more than, something else, then they're going to have egg on their face and they're going to look pretty stupid, right?
Yeah.
And so that's not how you handle UFO investigations. And the way that this thing needs to be treated, it needs to be taken out of the world of the journalist and passed over to the science groups to be able to actually analyze it, study it, and then when you come up with a conclusion, then make the announcement and share it.
So the idea is when a journalist gets a hold of some military footage or whatever, they should give it to people like you first.
Yeah, we should actually spend time looking at it and studying it and finding out that it's not a balloon or it's not something else that's misidentified, right?
Yep.
I mean, that's how we treat it in Blue Book. That's how we treat it in MUFON. We don't, necessarily go out with this stuff, ahead of time. And, it certainly destroys the credibility of the subject by having it put out there in advance of it actually being investigated and studied.
Very good. I've got two last quick questions. One, have you ever had to sign an ND on a UFO investigation that you did?
Sign an NDA, a national.
Right. Yeah, non-disclosure.
No, non-disclosure agreement. No, I haven't. No.
Okay.
I know that when I talk with, for example, there was a pilot that at Foreign Technology Division, where Project Blue Book was, that I went and gave a UFO lecture to the Foreign Technology Division area, and he came up and told me that his camera, he had a gun camera on the front of his aircraft, and his job was to go up and see if he could film these things in air. And when he came back, they would collect his film canister, take it off, and he'd have to go over and sign a non-disclosure agreement, saying that he wouldn't talk about the film that he had just taken of the object.
Very interesting.
We had one question from a guest, and I know it's probably nothing but speculation at this point, but do you have any idea why a UAP would need lights on it if in the first place?
It's a good question. I don't necessarily, so let me point out to you that most of the disc-shaped objects you had, a lot of them were like a single light source or something of that nature that were pretty much disc at night. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm talking about nighttime. That's when you see the lights. You'd also have some sort of cases like out there where people would report seeing like little lights around the perimeter. And again, it's one of those things that's like, why does an intelligence race that has a capability of being able to fly circles around any kind of thing need lights? It does not make any sense at all.
And if they're trying to stay secret.
Well, and then let me come back to that. So, we have navigational lights that blink at a certain rate, right?
Yep.
Well, you might have an object that's out there mimicking that because it doesn't want to be identified. So, maybe it's now looking at the fact that we tend to use these things and we react a certain way. So now you have an intelligent race that might be pretending to mimic that to also be not picked up, looked at, because the first thing we do is we go after them with, shooting at them. We try to chase them. We try to do all different kinds of things to be able to get them. And so to remain undetected, and especially if you've been visiting the planet Earth for a very long time, you're very much familiar with our military, our communications capabilities. You probably can speak every language on the planet. In fact, you probably know more about us than we do about them. And conceivably, you're going to use craft or lights or something of that nature to be able to fool or us into believing that it's just an aircraft going by.
So
and they can easily hide.
So hide in plain sight, and then most people looking up will go, "Oh, it's just an airplane."
Yeah. No, that's me speculating on why that they would do that, because I don't really claim to know their intent. But the fact is that over a period of time, we've seen lights on these things, and they don't necessarily, not all of them. I mean, there's not all of them. And then there's some where it might be the atmosphere that's actually lighting up the object, In other words, as I talked about that ion displacement or around the field, if you would, it could make it glow, and that's the object. And that could also be why some of the images are blurry. If you talked about the Tic Tac having some sort of a mirage-like effect around it, They might be blurry because of the field around it that it's using, the propulsion system. So those might be effects of that. But again, the light question always has bothered me as well. Like, why do they need lights? But then we also have objects that they'll drop what we call almost like a solid light. Have you ever heard of that? Where it's like a solid light, where it can actually, the light can actually come down to the ground and actually make a right-hand turn and go off a different direction.
Interesting.
And so if you have objects or lights where it can make those kind of 90-degree turns or do other kinds of things that we don't understand, then hey, weird stuff out there, right?
So, can the average person submit project ideas to you guys? Do you take funding from private people? I would imagine you do if they want to fund you guys at the SCU, correct?
Yeah, I mean, we're a 501c3 charity organization, so ultimately we're living off of the fact that we're getting donations from.
So I can write a check for $1 million and deduct it off my taxes, correct?
Yeah, and we'll be happy to take that and use it to buy equipment to be able to help us collect scientific data and send stuff to a lab and everything else.
Cool.
So that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to be able to get funds to be able to get, if you need a database, that costs a lot of money to be able to have a database. If you have tools, software tools to be able to do things and analyze things, that's a cost where all of us are, out of pocket. We're not, none of us are paid. So I haven't been paid a dime on UFOs since I got started at age 13. I don't even take money from lectures that I give and stuff like that. So it's all out of my own personal pocket, and that's the way we are. And we hold conferences. We just held our conference in the beginning of June. And again, that's using these donations to be able to have scientific conferences and to bring people, incredible doctors, in to deliver papers and things like that. So
cool.
That's what we're about.
So people can donate any amount, correct?
Yeah. Oh, sure. Yeah. And we have, again, we got projects where we're looking to be able to do instrumentation and set instrumentation out at sites and collect data. And equipment costs you a lot of money to be able to get. And so that's going to be great for us. Ultimately, we're about building partnerships as well to be able to get partner organizations that want to work with us. There's the donate button on the bottom of the screen on the very first page. We're also, just basically trying to be able to get the attention of the public to know that, hey, look, there are scientists. This is credible. We want to be able to validate what you guys are doing. I'm also a member of UAPX, and I'm trying to support what they're doing as well, to be able to get their instrumentation and their technology to be able to help us to be able to do that study.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I have to say, this is probably the most interesting conversations I've ever had.
Absolutely.
I'd love to have you back on again at some point here soon. So,
yeah, thanks for your time, Rich.
Yeah,
really appreciate it.
Is there any? Can they get a hold of you through your website?
Yeah, or if you go to the SCU there's a contact page up there in the SCU site where you go over to more, click on more at the top, and see it says contact.
Yeah.
If you just, it automatically will come to our inbox, and you can put down, hey, I want to ask Rich Hoffman a question, or I want to know more, or I might have an interest in being able to join SCU, and you can go here and just fill that contact page up.
So could somebody like myself join?
Yeah. Oh, we have different levels. So we have people that community access members that want to be able to just keep track of what we're doing.
Cool.
We have contributors who actually want to contribute and do scientific work or papers or something of that nature, and study or whatever. And so again, different levels.
Absolutely.
And so typically with the bottom line is that you have a very serious interest in the subject, that you treat it seriously, and that you support SCU's goals. And that's what we ask for. And that, again, we're a coalition. We're trying to, be partners. It's all about us being, separate, but working together. And that's what it's about.
And then to report a UAP, right? We can just click here if they have.
Yep.
and
Yeah,
use
we're
this
basically
information.
looking again. We want to stress that we are looking for more of the cases with real credible data, that as opposed to just any blurb that you see.
Yep, absolutely. Well, great. Is there anything else you wanted to mention before we sign off here, Rich?
Well, take a look at our website. It's explorescu.org. I don't know if you put that in like the show notes or something of that nature.
Yep. I'll make sure we link to it. And
But
I did share that earlier.
okay. So bottom line is just, keep in touch. Let us know what you find out as well. I'm open to talking with you all. And I think the dialogue and the conversation needs to continue, and we need to keep informing people and educating people about the subject. And so I appreciate being on with you to be able to do that. Right.
It's our pleasure. Our pleasure, Rich. We're honored to have you. Very honored.
Well,
thank you.
And have a good evening.
All right.
You too. Bye.
Good night, Al.